Representative Keeler, welcome to the committee. Good to see you on a Monday morning, making the drive down from Moorhead for this bill, I bet. So we're glad you're here. And with that being you're not on the committee, I will move that House File 444 be re-referred to the General Register and proceed with your bill overview.
Hey, Honey Watch Day. Good morning, members. Today, I'm in front of you with a bill that actually stems from the work that Chair Gomez and I did last session. We were lucky enough to actually have a preventing homelessness division that we spent 2 years extremely dedicated to understanding what the needs of Minnesota were from border to border. It was an interesting combination, understanding that homelessness impacts the entire state. Often there's a lot of messaging around just the cities, but as your greater Minnesota member, border city member, I'm here to tell you that we experience homelessness across this entire state at detrimental numbers. January, we always do a point in time count, and I think just for reference, it's fair to understand that this is absolutely the floor of the number. If any of you have participated in the January point in time count, you're just finding people that day that it is absolutely, we know that there's more people than this in the state of Minnesota who are experiencing homelessness, but that number last year was 7,917. What that means is that people are sleeping in these really cold winters. What it looks like in my community is people actually carve out holes in big snow piles and fill them with blankets just to try to stay warm because they're out of the wind. I am sure many of us had a warm home to go to this weekend. We probably woke up this morning and showered, had food, had all of those things that allowed us to show up here to be the best Minnesotan that we can be. What happens when you don't have that experience? As many of you know, I worked as a Native American liaison for 12 years. For 41 years, I've been walking in this world as an Indigenous woman. We sit at many tables that we hear about the disparities that people who look like me experience. Homelessness is massively one of them. So I'm coming to you today with what I believe is a solution of things that have been working, creating a vehicle to move forward to actually start the investment in preventing homelessness. You all are a very powerful group of people. You lead tables and conversations that impact education, healthcare, public safety, and the list goes on and on. I implore all of you that as we talk about preventing homelessness, you take it back to your tables and understand that all of you have an opportunity and a requirement to invest in ending homelessness in Minnesota. It doesn't matter who is at the table of leadership at the time. Each one of our constituents, each one of our communities, and the entire state of Minnesota need us to show up for each other. So with that, I'm going to briefly walk through the bill and understand why I believe that this is actually the vehicle to head down a path for Minnesota to be better at housing our individuals. So the first thing we know is that we need funding in capital shelter. If we don't actually build the brick and mortar, we can't actually save lives. So the first part of it is one-time funding for $150 million that would be available through 2028. This would go through an RFP process. One of the things I added is that there is an element of 40% of this money is required to go to Greater Minnesota. Again, your Greater Minnesota member understands that if we don't provide the supports in Greater Minnesota, they just end up funneling to the city. And we do better when we're in our own communities as we want to thrive and get reconnected. We can't build a vehicle without adding wheels. And so the emergency service program is actually designed, that would be a $20 million ask with $35 million ongoing, because we can't build a system without wheels to move forward. These are grants that have help ongoing supports, staffing, and different resources that each community and shelter would need. So once we save individuals from a night of being out in the cold, then we help them understand the opportunity to transitional housing. This is a 36-month process that helps individuals like me who maybe just didn't have generations before me to teach me how to fiscally be sound, or I didn't have generations before me teach me how to be a homeowner. Transitional housing is an effort that actually helps people move from homelessness into long-term housing. That's what we want to do. That's what increases our accessibility. We also know that we have a massive amount of youth, and when we talk about youth in this capacity, with our Homeless Youth Act, it's actually supporting individuals aged 24 and below. So one of the things that we did is we did a pilot program. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Close-Knit or Chosen Families. It's actually a housing opportunity for individuals between ages 18 and 24. So if you have somebody in that age range that would want to stay with you, it would just be grant opportunities to offset some of those costs. So if you're housing somebody in your home and they're taking more showers or eating some of your food, it would just be small grants to help offset that, to maybe stop them in that bridge of ending homelessness. It's a pilot program. So that we can look at it over a year and see if we think it's successful or not. That would be our decision to make as a group. And then lastly, there's a piece of it that's it's the HMIS, it's the Homelessness Management Information System. And understanding from the time that I've been in this work, and also channeling a little bit of Representative Scott, and knowing that if we're going to collect data on people, that there has to be real clear barriers of protection with that. I live in a world, again, as an Indigenous person, where data has been used against us in ways to know where we're at, to find us, to relocate us. And so I'm extremely sensitive to that. What I like about this system is it does have an opt-out option. So if I would show up at a shelter and I don't feel comfortable sharing my information with this system, I have the eligibility to opt out. What this is actually a federal requirement for us to utilize to track our systems and to know what's working well and not working well. It just doesn't come with any funding. So this would just be allocating funding to go to that HMIS system to offset that funds to actually be able to support the communities. So members, I know that this isn't everything. I know that there is so much more that we all need to invest in to end homelessness, but I and others really believe that this is a strong vehicle to move forward, to work collectively to end homelessness. Happy to answer any questions. It's pretty straightforward. I believe that the investment is absolutely worth it, and this is how we make a stronger, thriving Minnesota in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. And we'll go to member discussion, and just noting we have both the fiscal note and the tracking document that Representative Keeler just walked through in her discussion of the bill overview. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the author, question for you. In subdivision 5, subdivision 6, my apologies, lines 2.18 through 2.22, you over 2 years appropriate $2.597390 million to administer these grants. Given the recent report from the OLA regarding grants management, do you have any intention of tightening that up, shoring that up, putting some guardrails around how those grants are administered? And I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have read that report with great interest, and yet I don't see anything here, and I'm hoping that you would take heed of that report and go down that road, because $2.3 million is $2.6 million is a lot.
I don't hear a question there, but
I asked her if she was going to address that
Representative
in a
Keeler.
future iteration of this bill.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, this is the bill as it is. I'm absolutely open for more conversations if there's things that you'd like to offer to add for the guardrails in that piece. I trust our agency, and I trust that what they've informed us of as far as their ability to get this money out is appropriate in what they will do.
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and that was not the answer I was looking for, or I had expected, actually. The OLA report was eye-opening, I think, for all of us, that the inability of the administration and administrations over time to administer grants has been woefully lacking, and it seems that it would be something that an author who had been plugged into what's going on would do themselves. It's not my job to administer or to amend your bill, since I'll be voting against it, but I think that it would be good authorship to amend that in, so thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the author. I was on the Prevention of Homelessness Committee with Chair Gomez last year, and I asked quite often this question I'm going to ask you, and so she probably already knows what it is. But you said in your opening statements that this bill will prevent and eliminate homelessness, and it's important that we do everything we can for that purpose, of course. But the question that I'm going to ask is, where in this bill does it actually prevent the situation that caused the homelessness? And the reason why I say that's important is because if we don't deal with that, we're going to have continually growing numbers that are going to need this service. And yes, your bill provides shelter for those that are homeless, and so it prevents them from being homeless tomorrow, but it didn't do anything to prevent them from being homeless in the past. And so my question is there anything in this bill that would actually address the situations that they found themselves in that allowed them to be homeless?
Representative Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Petersburg. I think that it's important to understand that, again, kind of what I said is that all of us sit at tables that are a part of preventing homelessness. This really is just a small component of it. I do think that there's a piece in the preventing homelessness around the transitional housing, is that we do support individuals through shelter to save lives that night. But then the transitional housing component allows people the education that they need to be able to be successful in long-term homeownership. Granted, that's a small piece of it. This is a much bigger conversation that I would use all the money that we had to invest in all the issues, that are around lack of access to healthcare, our mental health supports, our behavior, our substance abuse. The list goes on of all of the areas that we need to invest in. This is really just a small component of it.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that question. And yes, your transitional housing does help them learn how, from this point forward, to help, but we haven't done anything with the real root cause that happened before that. And that, as you said, indeed is a difficult situation. But part of it is our own regulatory system and how, as a state, we've increased the cost of housing just because of what we wanted to do in regulations. And we aren't addressing any of that here as well. And I understand that may not be the direction of this particular bill, but when you had indicated in your opening statement that this would eliminate and prevent homelessness, I just wanted to caution us to say dealing with it after the fact is good, but dealing with it beforehand is even better. Medical field has found that out, that it's much easier to deal preventively than it is with after the fact. And I think we need to consider that as an issue as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few things. First, to Representative Petersburg, and I do actually, it's weird because I have my back to you, talking to the mic, but I'm looking at you in some way. So I do appreciate you bringing us back to, and asking people who came in front of our committee about how it is that we actually prevent homelessness. And there are a few realities that are in our world right now. One is that we have a critical shortage of housing, period. We have a critical shortage of housing that is affordable to families in this economy. We have a situation where housing prices and the price of literally everything else has just gone up and up and up, and wages have stagnated in our country for 30 or 40 years. Every gain that workers make in our economy gets offset by like a $5 a dozen of eggs, right? So, I don't believe that Representative Keeler, in fact, I'm positive that she did not say that this would end homelessness. This, it's a lot of money, right? It's $350 million. It's a really significant investment in people in our state who are struggling. But nobody is under any illusion that this alone will prevent or will end homelessness. It will prevent homelessness for people. And I want to say, people who are homeless today, if we can get them into shelter, if we can get them into transitional housing, especially, we learned a lot about shelter during the pandemic. We learned a lot about what actually works in shelter during the pandemic. And the way that we've been doing shelter hasn't had a great ultimate placement rate, like a permanent placement rate for people. But when you sort of more intentionally design shelter to meet people where they are, 24/7 shelter where people can bring their belongings, where they have a door they can close, where where they can bring their partners and their pets. People end up in housing. I mean, you can see this if you look at the placement statistics during COVID, especially in Hennepin and Ramsey. I mean, really amazing work is happening. So, but spending a few $100 million, right, to prevent the people who are currently homeless from being homeless in a week or a month or a year is not going to prevent homelessness writ large. We have huge problems in our economy, in the realities of working people in our country, with rising costs, with lack of availability, particularly of affordable housing. I think I'm turning to Representative Howard. I mean, is it 50% of renters who are cost burdened, or 30%? I can't remember. It's lots of renters, right? That means that people are spending more than a third of their income just on their housing costs. So like, think about what that would mean for your personal economy. So I just want to say, I appreciate that, but it's like, this bill is not going to solve the housing and economic issues that have gotten us to where we are, which is a place where more and more people are falling through the cracks in our economy. Secondly, I want to speak just briefly to Representative Nash's questions about the OLA report. Now, if there's anybody in this committee that has not spoken to their local homelessness service provider about what it was like during COVID, I would urge you to go and talk to them. We had a situation where, you know, there's just this unprecedented global pandemic. We were operating with really imperfect information, but what we had was an emergency homelessness system that mostly had people in congregate settings, a lot of medically fragile people in congregate settings, sleeping together in, you know, a gymnasium, breathing the same air. And we didn't know, especially in March of 2020, I mean, we didn't know what we were facing. And if you were serving in office during that time, you remember just the intensity and all of the questions that we all had to answer, again, in the context of not knowing exactly what we were facing. But our emergency homelessness response programs across the state of Minnesota, like, did this incredible fast transformation and saved people's lives. And the emergency services program, which was one of the focuses of the OLA report, went from a base, I believe it was less than $2 million, between $1 million and $2 million, to that turned out to be one of the main ways that federal COVID funding got into our communities was through this program that previously had moved about $1 million out every couple years. And they moved tens of millions of dollars through that program out into the community, allowing our emergency shelter providers to move people into hotels, to isolate medically fragile people, to protect elders, to protect people who were sick with COVID. Okay, and they did that, and read the OLA report. What they said was they found not $1, not one single dollar that had gone to a purpose other than helping to support our emergency shelter providers to save people's lives. What they did find was that in the course of moving from getting $1 million out into our community to I believe it was like $65 or so million out into our community, that there was, with I will add, no additional staff, right? DHS didn't add staff. They didn't have the ability to add staff to do that work. They had to make it happen. There were some paperwork things that did not happen, right? And the commissioner came forward and said, yeah, there were some, like, you know, some of them were more serious than others, I think. I think there was some, like, you know, conflict of interest stuff that everybody wants to make sure happens. But there was also, like, this piece of paper didn't get placed in this file properly, right? But I just will say that I want to extend some grace to those providers who, again, made sure that Minnesotans didn't die, that we did not have a mass casualty incident of our most vulnerable and medically fragile people in the state. And I want to thank DHS for that work. And I would just reiterate, there was no finding from the OLA that there was any misspent dollars, any, you know, actual, like, funds that went somewhere they weren't supposed to go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we do have quite a list, so before someone gets a second bite at the apple, I'm going to make my way through the list, but I will put you at the bottom, Representative Nash. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Keeler, for bringing this bill. And I really appreciated, Chair Gomez, your comments. I had the opportunity to serve on the Preventing Homelessness Committee last year, and I thought what both you as Chair Representative Gomez and you as Vice Chair Representative Keeler did, which was so extraordinary in that committee, is you brought people directly impacted by this issue to the committee. We heard their voices, we heard their concerns. And I just want to speak to subdivisions 3, 4, and 5 on page 2, because I think I'm particularly pleased that this is included. I did have the opportunity to, in the interim, to visit 2 facilities in the district I represent that deal specifically with homeless youth. And one is called The Bridge. And, you know, Chair Gomez, you're absolutely right. I mean, people did heroic work and continue to do heroic work every day under very, very challenging circumstances. And so to have this grant opportunity available, particularly for homeless youth, I think is really, really important. And then finally, Madam Chair, and I know you're familiar with this in Duluth, I've talked about this a lot in the Preventing Homelessness Committee, the transitional housing program. One example there is called the Steve O'Neill Apartments. And in addition to being named after a close friend and mentor of mine, Steve O'Neill, this is a way actually to prevent homelessness, because what this transitional housing facility offers is wraparound services. So you're helping people with jobs, you're helping with childcare, you're helping with education. They even have a garden where so people's food needs are addressed there. And people stay there for an extended period of time, and then after they have lived there, they go on and are successful and are placed in permanent housing situations. So this makes a huge difference in people's lives. I can't think of anything more urgent and more important, and I appreciate the bill and strongly support it.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Representative Keeler, could you walk me through subdivision 4 on the homeless youth part? And just touch on the fact, you already brought up one question that I had, and if you can just clarify, it's just for persons that are 18 to 24. How do you apply for the grants, and are there grant limits?
Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Novotny. The chosen family grants, as it was presented to us through that organization, the limit is $300 through the grant. As far as if you have somebody living with you in those ages, that would be the limit to that each individual could apply for through DHS.
Representative Novotny.
And thank you, Chair Olson and Representative Keeler. Are there any, how do they apply for the grants? How do they get that? How do they know about it?
Representative Keeler.
Chair Olson, Representative Novotny. It's just an RFP. It's an open application process that chosen family would then process and divvy out. The nice part about it is it's a one-year process. It's a pilot program for us to come back and look at to see if there's different ways or different elements that we would want to add. Like if $300 maybe wasn't enough, we know that the cost of living is going up in many different areas, that cost of water, cost of food, cost of those offsets, we could review in a year.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Olson. I just have concerns that there's, and the Representative Keeler did address several of those. I just want to make sure that this isn't subverted. So I'd like to keep in touch with you and please work with me on this program in the future. Thank you.
Representative Keeler.
Chair Olson, Representative Novotny, I would absolutely be open to work with you. I've said that throughout the last 3 years working on this. I am extremely passionate around this topic and am deeply open to more ideas. So I will take you up on that.
Thank you. Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Keeler, for bringing this bill forward. Members, this is an overdue. If you haven't seen the number of people who are sleeping on the streets, if you recall last week and this entire few months that the weather was so cold, that there are individuals within the state of Minnesota who don't have a home. In my own district, we had the largest encampment for more than 200 individuals in a state-owned facility that was disbanded. If we can't take care of those who need the most, who are we taking care of? if we don't do the right thing, the moral approach of providing a home, a place to put a head and have a place that we can use the restroom and just do like any other regular person, then we're not helping anybody. This is the moral obligation that we're sent here to do. You know, homelessness, as I've said, is not hopelessness. Homelessness is not helplessness. And I want everybody to know today, this is an important issue. If you haven't seen homeless individuals in your district, they're coming to our districts. I want you to work with me so we can go to them and ask them why they're there. Some of them have got mental health issues. Some of them have got substance use disorder. There are many issues that they're dealing with. So members, I think we should do the appropriate thing and move this bill forward so we can save lives, because homelessness is also deadly. You should have seen the report that was issued by the Department of Health about homelessness that just last week. And the cost that we're spending just to keep people in the hospitals because they don't have a place to go to. This is a small drop in the bucket that we're doing to solve a problem that we haven't done anything in the last few years. And I think to address the issue of the OLA report, we have seen the response, we understand the issues, and quite frankly, the safeguards that were put in place by the department in terms of making sure the public funds and assets are protected, that there's no fraud, waste, and abuse, is quite frankly admirable, because they did the right thing. And they went back and fixed all those issues that they were required to comply with the paperwork necessary to do this work. So there wasn't any, and I can assure you that was the information that we got from the hearings that we've had on this issue. And I hope members will follow up with the department to understand better, because that's something which they did. If you look at subdivision 6, this is not a huge amount to make sure that we have a system in place. And quite frankly, I also appreciate the department putting a new grant management system that they're using as a tool to make sure that all the boxes are checked, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. And it's something that I appreciate the department has put forward. So I hope we will all support this bill. Thank you so much, Representative Keeler. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to thank Representative Keeler for bringing this forward and how thoughtful you were in putting these packages together and working with community to do so. And echo Representative Gomez that we all know that this isn't the silver bullet that's going to end homelessness. And I know you know that, and I know you said that. And just a reminder to all of us that the investments we make in education, workforce, healthcare, housing, all of that is part of preventing homelessness. And all of us around the table have a piece to play in that. I want to echo Representative Hornstein. I've also been with my community and looking at one of our transitional housing programs and watching how much that can break those cycles and build hope. I volunteered there. It's important for us to understand that this can't always just be a Band-Aid approach, but we still have to stem the bleeding. As Representative Norris said, homelessness can be deadly. And I also agree with what he said about putting the cost in to actually do a system that operates. The OLA report, one of the #1 things they said was, it's hard to manage grants when you don't have the money to do so or the systems to do so. That's an overall discussion we're going to have to continue to have. Thank you, Representative Keeler, for this bill, and I look forward to us doing a lot of good work together to invest in our human infrastructure this session.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Chair Olson, and thank you, Representative Keeler, and I really appreciate the conversation. You know, I think a proposal like this brings to mind what housing advocates have shared with us, sort of the maxim that shelter saves lives and housing ends homelessness. Your bill will save lives, and that is an element of our work, our journey to end homelessness. This is the first step on that path, and so thank you for bringing it forward. And it is so urgent we take this step, and just members have highlighted this, but can't underscore how much outside of these walls this is a crisis for Minnesotans. Last year in Hennepin County, there was a 268% increase in families experiencing homelessness. And that spike is happening all across the state. There were 20,000 evictions filed last year in Minnesota, and we're now at a spiked level well above pre-pandemic levels. And I did look up the statistic, Representative Gomez. 590,000 Minnesotans are paying more than 30% of their income in housing, and more than 200,000 Minnesotans are paying more than 50% of your income in housing. And so to the question about how do we prevent homelessness, the number one cause of homelessness is Minnesotans not being able to afford their home. So that's going to require a lot of work amongst everyone around this table to solve these challenges. But the first step, we should not fiddle in this body while Minnesotans are literally freezing without a home. And that's why this bill is so urgent, and I'm so glad that Representative Keeler is moving it forward. And that does bring me to a question. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the practical impact of moving forward on a bill like this now versus waiting. And what is going to be the impact for Minnesotans by us addressing this urgent need quickly in this legislative session?
Representative Keeler.
Chair Olson, Representative Howard, thank you for asking that question. As we do the work in shelters and making sure that we prepare to the best ability that we can, we're always fighting against winter. That's always the one piece that we're looking at. We want to keep people in warm places when it gets cold in Minnesota. We all know that. And so the outline for us to be able to set up the RFP processes for the grant, to be able to post and to hire the staff that we need to get this off the ground and going in a really strong, effective way, there's always like a 6-month time frame lapse. So the reason why there's some urgency in this now is if we can get this moving and we can get it into law and moved, we are on a path to make sure that we have the implementation in place to protect people as early as September, which, as we know, that is a good time of year, versus waiting until May. We wouldn't be able to implement things until end of November, early December, which is actually where we start to see really high levels of death because of homelessness.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Cleburne. Thank you, Representative Keeler, for bringing this bill, and from a member from Greater Minnesota who has 0 homeless shelters in the entire county. I only represent a portion of Wright County, but there's not a single homeless shelter in the entire county. And I used to work quite a bit in the nonprofit sector, and it's several, but within Wright County, it's several also there. And one of them was the Buffalo Food Shelf, and we would see the need tremendously. I remember in 2006 when the housing crisis and crash was coming, and we actually saw it probably first in Wright County just because of the population, and there were a lot of trades guys that lived there. So I saw it happening in 2006 at the food shelf, and then of course it just grew exponentially after that, and I've encountered it for decades myself, just not myself personally, but just within my community. So I appreciate that. And my questions are no way reflective of that. And I think we have 5 almost floor speech like of support on your side of the aisle. But I'd like to get back to the bill itself. That's why we are here. So my question is actually, I have a couple questions, and I'm just going to ask them so that we can kind of speed it up a little bit. But was there a fiscal note available for the first fiscal committee? And I have the notes in front of me. That would have been Representative Norris Committee, Human Services, Finance. Do you know if the fiscal note was available for the first fiscal committee to review and reflect on? Because this is quite a lot of money, and it looks to me like you're standing up a new program. I don't see any money in the 2023. So I'm looking at the fiscal note that has been provided. And in 2023, I don't see any costs. So I'm assuming from that we're standing up a new program. So one, was the fiscal note available in the first fiscal committee, which would have been Human Services? And then the second part of my question is, we've mentioned a lot of things in here, as in standing up the homelessness management system, which is an IT system, a data management system. Did this go to judiciary, where they also deal with data practices? Did this go to capital investment? It has $150 million of capital investment. Did it go to capital investment? It relates directly to housing, as it's a homelessness committee, and we no longer have a preventing homelessness committee. So did it go to the housing committee? And my final question is, did it go to the public safety committee? Because I have not looked at the Wilder study, the point in time homelessness report as of this year. I know they just compiled it. I'm not sure if it's released, but I haven't seen it. But when I looked at last year's, there was approximately 8,000 that were homeless, and about 4,000 of the 8,000 had been recently discharged from the DOC, Department of Corrections. And so did it go to any of those committees? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and we'll get to the questions. And I believe Mr. Harney is here he could speak to the fiscal part of it. I know just enough to be dangerous, having worked at a shelter, that HMIS is a word I've heard for a long time. I don't think that's new. I don't think emergency shelter programs are new. So again, I know just enough to know to be dangerous, but none of those are new programs. We're not standing up a new tech thing in this bill. And I will note at the top of the bill did go to Human Services, Children and Families, we're in Ways and Means, and has followed bill path as needed. But with that, I'll turn to Mr. Harney to talk about the funding in, I believe the question was, and why not 2023 and why are 2024 and beyond?
I'll take the first question, Chair Olson, about the fiscal notes availability in committee.
Great.
Representative O'Neill, the bill, the fiscal note was not available in Representative Nor's committee. It was available in Children and Families for the hearing. The account that the bill touches on and is funded through exists through Children and Economic Support grants that are underneath Children and Families jurisdiction. The bill is slightly different than the bill you all heard before this, where they're setting the base, the current law base, and then appropriating the change. What this bill is doing is, in fact, just using the current law program and appropriating new money and a new base on top of it. So there is current law appropriations to emergency services grants, the Homeless Youth Act, and transitional housing. But what this bill is doing is creating new appropriations, a new base, in addition to the current law base amounts that exist today.
And Mr. Harney, I'm sorry, I didn't ask you. Will you identify yourself for
Yes.
the record, please?
Joe Harney, House Fiscal.
Thank you. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if fiscal staff then could explain how much is new and how much is base.
Mr. Harney.
Chair Olson, Representative O'Neill, in anticipation of that question, the current law base for emergency services grants is $13,688,000 in fiscal year 24-25. The Homeless Youth Act base is $11,024,000 in 24-25. And the base for transitional housing is $6,368,000 in fiscal year 24-25. I've not done the math on the difference or the additive effect of that, but that's the current law base.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So when we add up 24-25, according to the fiscal tracking note I have in front of me, the total net fiscal impact is 229, so almost 230 million. Of that, 150 million is in capital investment for emergency shelter facilities. And then it goes down in the tails because it's a one-time appropriation for 150 million, and it goes down to basically 124 million. Do you happen to know the difference between the numbers you just said from the base and the 220, well, let's call it 230 million?
Mr. Harney.
Representative Keeler showing me a chart here. I'll defer to her to answer that one.
Representative Keeler.
Okay. Chair Olson, Representative O'Neill. I was looking at my fancy sheet here. So you want to know what the total base is with where the original base was, what this bill would add on top, and where we land with the total base then, correct? Yep. Okay, so ESP with the addition, so we have 40 million in 2024 with 70 ongoing. So that would be 83, 688 in the tails moving forward for ESP. Homeless Youth Act originally is 11, 24. We're adding 40 in the tails, which would make it 51, 24 ongoing. Transitional housing we've added, and so the ongoing for that will be 15,968.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you. Madam Chair, so I'm wondering if I could, if the author would talk about that, I mean, I can see the bill path, so I can see that it didn't go to capital investment, the housing committee, judiciary committee, or public safety, and where if she could just address why none of those committees were
Sure.
a stop.
I can give that to Representative Keeler. I will say, having served in this body long enough, and I think some of my colleagues talked about this, housing and issues around homelessness are tricky, even though it sounds like house or home. Like, a lot of it lives within the DHS world. A lot of it lives within different spaces, capital investment, taxes. I mean, you can't look at this. So I think Representative Keeler can speak to the bill path, but I think something for all of us to keep in mind is that's probably why so many chairs just spoke on this issue, is because it does, depending on what elements we're looking at, and this is specifically around homeless programming. And so with that, Representative Keeler can speak to that.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Representative O'Neill. So it's actually one of the things that when we created the subdivision last year, originally it was housed under housing. Then we did realize that a lot of the services and the supports that we provide in preventing homelessness were under HHS, which was massive at the time. And now with all of the new jurisdictions and where the line items were, 100% of this funding goes through children and families, which is why we heard it in Human Services and Children and Family. We didn't hear it anywhere else.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, you actually did hear it in Human Services Finance with Representative Norris' committee. That's where it started, but it didn't have a fiscal note available for his committee to review and discuss the changes. Then it did finally go to Children and Families, and now to here. Okay, I just wanted to hear why we are not going through some of these other committees, as we talked about a lot of those things just in here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Neal, and thank you for bringing us back to the numbers of the bill. We appreciate it. This is definitely one that I think gets a lot of people in a lot of different ways and is an important conversation we're having. And with that, we don't have too much time left, and I have a couple people on the list, so we'll do Representative Nash, Representative Hassan, and then Representative Garofalo to close before we go to Representative Keeler for the last word on the bill. Representative Nash.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and this will be brief. Just wanted to address when my name was mentioned regarding my intent about asking for guardrails and processes to be put up, even though the outcome of the previous money may have been great. My wife is an industrial engineer, and I was her study buddy when she was finishing her last year, and the continual theme that came out of that was process drives improvement. And even though something may have happened well in the past, doesn't mean that it necessarily will without some intervention and guardrails put in proactively. We do this every day. We do it on the highway, Representative. And Hornstein, we do that all the time. We try to make proactive measures to make sure that down the road, things don't go awry. So don't infer that I was saying anything bad about the department. I'm saying the OLA report was quite clear that grant management really is a great area for improvement. And that was my admonition, and I was a little surprised that even in deference to the fact that it came out, we are not doing that with this bill. So once again, process drives improvement.
Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep. Keeler, for this bill, and also thank you, Rep. Gomez, for all the work that you have done as a former chair of preventing homelessness. I have no concern on spending this money on our most vulnerable. It's our children, it's our families who are struggling, it is vulnerable people, people who are experiencing mental health issues, people who are experiencing opioid crisis, people who are running away from domestic abuse. So this is the right thing to do. I encourage everybody to go and visit a shelter or volunteer at a shelter. If there is no shelter at your district, consider this an invite, an open invite to my district and other districts that have shelters, encampments, and high presence of people experiencing homelessness. I walk around in my district and I will meet somebody who's experiencing homelessness, somebody who is having maybe ODing on the street. The presence and the need for this money is visible in my district and other districts. And I volunteer at a homeless shelter. Not as often as I love, but as much as I can because this work keeps me busy. And I guarantee you, every time I talk to somebody and I say, where are you from? They are highly most likely to say that they're not from Minneapolis. They're from suburbia. They're from greater Minnesota. They're from other states trying to move to Minnesota. So the problem that we really think that homelessness is an urban core issue is far from the truth. I have a friend who came from Norway, and he was visiting here, and I shared this in housing, and I'll share it again. I think it's really suitable for this space. And he said, can I go see your district? There is Norway House in my district. So we started with the Norway House because he's Norwegian. And we went to, tour my district, and he saw the encampment. He was horrified. He was like, why are there people sleeping outside? I'm like, well, they don't have a place to sleep. That was shocking to him because in Norway, everybody has a right to housing and healthcare. He was like, what kind of society are you guys? I'm like, I don't know. It's a society that lets people sleep outside. And as cold as it has been, that we've been cranking up our heaters because it's too cold, or we're, putting in, extra blankets. People don't have that. They're sleeping outside. They don't know if they're going to make it through the night or if they're going to freeze to death. The other night, I think it was Friday night, the night that was super cold. I was, I spilled something in my car and I tried to clean it without gloves. I came back to my house and I'm like screaming. My son was like, what happened to you? I'm like, my hands are frozen. And, at that moment, I realized like the luxury I have coming into my house and trying to warm up my hands, but some people don't. This is the right bill to do. This is the right money to spend on the right issue. And Madam Chair, I will request a roll call for this bill.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, in my role as the minority lead in this committee, I'm going to exercise my purview to assign a homework assignment to members of the committee. I know that you totally authorized that, so.
As the minority lead, I think, well, we haven't heard the homework assignment yet. Representative Garofalo.
This close. I almost had her. No, I would, and I'm sure that there are some members who represent Minneapolis who've done this already. If you have a chance, you should take a morning or an afternoon, and you should go visit the Avivo Village in Minneapolis. What this is they are providing services to clients who are extraordinarily troubled. Okay, many are battling substance abuse, mental health issues, and their primary focus is just to get people out of tents. And I hear the term, they use tiny houses. I think it's kind of a pejorative term. But what they're just trying to do is get people indoors, sleeping on beds during the day, eating, just getting, because if you're sleeping 2 or 3 hours a day, whatever mental health issues you're having are just being exacerbated. This is an extraordinarily difficult population. And if nothing else, from a public policy standpoint, one of our responsibilities as legislators is just to understand the diversity of problems and people in our state. And as you know, I'm a white boy from Farmington, right? If I don't go seek this stuff out, I ain't gonna see it, right? So I would encourage people. For me, it was a moving experience to see people who are literally saving people's lives every day, dealing with what is in making very difficult choices, and I would just encourage people to do that. Now, Madam Chair, members, 2 things can be true. You can be supportive of programs while also acknowledging that there's current problems with how we're running things in Minnesota. I'm not going to ask the author to yield to this question, but I would like, before this bill was on the floor, I think it would be helpful if members of this committee had an inventory of the total amount of money that we are currently spending preventing and enacting and ending homelessness right now. I did a ballpark figure last night, but I don't feel accurate enough. I don't think it's accurate enough to say it, but if there's any way, Madam Chair, that you, or I don't know if I can ask that of the author, that we could actually have that information before. I think people would be shocked to find out how much money we're currently spending across many departments in the area of homelessness. Is there a formal request I can do for that, or Ms. Adrians, is that a good enough of a request I could ask for that? You could delegate. Okay, thank you. I think people would be surprised, and Representative Keeler, there's been I just got something that was passed over to me. Someone who's not in the room was popping off saying that somehow Republican members were being disrespectful to you in committee. I don't know what they're talking about. You seem like you are very well informed on your issue, and you put a lot of seriousness into this. So I don't know why third parties outside this room are trying to inject stupid commentary on this. I felt like the conversation today was really good. So if I'm wrong on this, please speak with me afterwards if somebody said something that was inappropriate. But because you are a thoughtful and smart legislator, I have a specific homework assignment for you as well. Again, this is my role as a minority leader. There is a great book, because I know you care. It's by a gentleman by the name of Marvin Olasky. It's called The Tragedy of American Compassion. And it's not just for you, but members of the committee, because I know that you work in this area very closely. It's a book that helped shape my views on public policy. I think it would be great if you had a chance, you and I could talk about that book sometime. Not because I think you're uninformed or unprincipled or uneducated. I just think it's something that provides additional context to things. My last comments, Madam Chair, are that the Office of the Legislative Auditor report has been referenced, and it should be noted, members, that in the nonprofit sector, we have pervasive noncompliance. Those are the words that were used in the report. They said that the agencies are failing to do the very basics of grant oversight. And shoveling more and putting, whether well-intentioned or not, putting more money into these programs without proper compliance and oversight is asking for trouble. I'll be voting no on the roll call vote today, but I would look forward to having that information from nonpartisan staff. And Representative Keeler, I hope you and I have a chance to talk about the new Garofalo Book Club that I'm trying to start up here at the legislature. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, that is the end of member discussion, so I will turn it over to Representative Keeler. We definitely filled our time on these two bills, and they're important bills, and I'm really glad you were here to present your bill, Representative Keeler. Last word on your bill.
Thank you, Chair Olson and members. I would second that homework assignment. I have been serving in my communities, both, you heard me before talk about the food shelf, and in our shelters across this entire state, and really in the region. So I agree that all of us as public servants should and absolutely could together get out into spaces. And you'll be happy to know I'm a lifelong learner. I actually graduated top in my class with my degrees, and so as long as it's on audiobook and I can listen to it on my drive back and forth, I'll add it to my list. But thank you, members, for the robust conversation. I do believe this is our job, to have these conversations, to hold each other accountable in the work that we're doing. I'm a massive empath in this work, and sitting for 2 years to listen to the struggles, knowing that we had individuals testify in our committee that actually didn't live to see another birthday because we're not acting fast enough. And so this is not going to end everything, and I think it's going to be actually a really big fiscal note to see what we're doing to actually invest in preventing homelessness, because it's in all areas. It's in access to education, access to higher education, access to healthcare, transportation. I mean, the list really goes on and on, because if you look at the reasons why people end up homeless, it's a massive spread of issues that all of you sit at those tables at. So this is a small component. And Representative Novotny, I really do want to work with you on what you see or could see the future of around that program, as I am always open to all of these discussions. Pilamaye, and thank you so much for your time, Chair and members.
With that, I renew my motion that House File 444 be re-referred to the General Register, and there was a roll call, so the clerk will take the roll. Ms. Killian, it seems so formal to say clerk. Ms. Killian.
Chair Olson.
Aye.
Chair Olson, aye. Vice Chair Edelson.
Aye.
Edelson, aye. Lead Garofalo.
No.
Garofalo, no. Representative Acom.
Aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Egbaje.
Aye.
Egbaje, aye. Representative Becker-Finn is excused. Representative Freiberg.
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Representative Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Representative Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Representative Heinzman.
No.
Heinzman, no. Representative Hornstein.
Aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Howard.
Aye.
Howard, aye. Representative Cleavorn.
Aye.
Cleavorn, aye. Representative Creshaw.
No.
Creshaw, no. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Moeller.
Aye.
Moeller, aye. Representative Nash.
No.
Nash, no. Representative Noor.
No, aye.
Noor, aye. Representative Novotny. Novotny, no. Representative O'Neill.
No.
O'Neill, no. Representative Pulowski.
Pulowski, aye.
Pulowski, aye. Representative Petersburg.
No.
Petersburg, no. Representative Farr.
Or no.
Farr, no. Representative Pinto.
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Schumacher.
No.
Schumacher, no. Representative Scott. No. Scott, no. Representative Joachim.
Joachim, aye.
Joachim, aye. Madam Chair, there are 17 ayes and 10 nays and 1 excused.
On 17 ayes and 10 nays, the motion prevails and House File 444 has been re-referred to the General Register.